Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander Score Studio. Welcome to the show. So on today's episode, I've got a very exciting deck tech for you. One that's got a commander that's, well, it can go in a couple of different directions. There are certain ways that you can take it that can be, well, very effective, very efficient. There are other ways you can take it that can be quite brutal, and there's some in between as well. I, of course, am talking about the very cool, very awesome, currently pretty popular as of recently. Let's talk about Thalia and the Gitrog monster. That's right. Thalia is back, but I think more fans out there are more excited about, no offense to Thalia, the Gitrog monster, a fan favorite, is back. And yeah, let's jump into the deck tech by talking about this fantastic commander. A 4/4 human frog horror with first strike and death touch. So that's a spicy combination. That costs 1 white, black, green. And the reason that combination is so spicy is because, well, in combat, this is going to be incredibly difficult to take out because you get to hit first with this in combat. And also, you get to assign combat damage in a way, well, with that death touch that makes this really difficult to ever take out. Because again, if your opponents don't have, say, first strike or indestructible or any of those kinds of things, this essentially is just like, okay, yeah, block with whatever creatures you want. I'm just going to assign 1 point of damage and take them out. So yeah, your opponents are probably going to have to just block with 1 creature throughout the game. This is going to be really hard to take out in combat, which is very important for it. And yeah, there are also ways to force blocks too. We'll get to those here in a little bit. That being said, it also says you may play additional land on each of your turns. That is massive. Being able to play extra lands is huge because, well, hey, let's get extra lands out there. Let's get some potentially, landfall triggers. We'll talk about some of those exciting effects here in a little bit. And yeah, being able to ramp in commanders, of course, a very powerful thing. Getting ahead on lands, ramping to cast some big spells, and yeah, really take advantage of those lands. We'll talk about plenty of those ways too on this deck as well. Next up, creatures and non-basic lands your opponents control into the battlefield tapped. This is a great hate bear effect that can slow your opponents down a lot. First of all, having their creatures come into play tapped, well, negates any kind of hasty creatures that can attack right away. And also, yeah, makes it more difficult for your opponents to block. Not as if it was already, incredibly difficult to block this creature, at least. Your opponents won't be able to block, your other creatures or your opponent's creatures. It's harder for them to, get their defenses up. Secondly, their non-basic are going to come into play, tapped. So essentially, hey, slow them down on mana as well. And then finally, yeah, hey, whenever Thalia and the Gitrog monster attacks, sacrifice a creature or a land, and then draw a card. This, again, works very well with that first strike and death touch. Thalia and the Gitrog monster is very protected in combat. This is a great attack trigger. Again, being able to sacrifice even just, say, one of your lands, you're going to be able to replace them again when you are playing additional lands on your turns, especially if you can get access to your graveyard lands, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, a way to do that. And of course, yeah, being able to sacrifice some creatures for value too. There are certain creatures that actually want to be sacrificed. And of course, there's plenty of ways to make a lot of fodder for this commander. So yeah, there's a lot of exciting things that you can do with this one. I decided not to take this into a hate bear centric deck. This is going to definitely focus on landfall, which is a bit more friendly, at least for a play group like mine. So yeah, that is the direction that I'm taking. It can be quite the powerful commander that can pack quite the punch. So with all that said, let's talk about the budget for this deck. According to Moxfield, this deck is $30.51. And keep in mind, that does not include the cost of shipping or the cost of basic lands. That being said, you might be able to save even more on this deck by buying this deck on TCG Player and utilizing heavily played cards. You might be able to save even more. So yeah, there you go. So make sure you're optimizing your deck and your cart for that. I will mention that this commander is nearly, it's $6, $7 or so at this point. So it is a pretty expensive commander compared to some of the other ones I utilize on this channel. That being said, again, that overall budget is not that expensive, even including this $7 card, because every other card in this deck is less than $1, so it's very budget friendly. And if you are interested in this deck, make sure you check out that deck list link in the description below. Now, with all that said, let's jump into the tactics. Yeah, again, on these episodes, I talk about, these cards within tactics, show you how this deck works, how we're going to win with it, and we're going to start things off with tactic number 1, which I'm calling Land the Roll. Get it? Land the roll. Anyways, first up, there's Wayfarer's Vow. Of course, pay 2 tap sacrifice. Go get a basic land in a play tapped. Moving on, we've got Edge of Autumn, which is basically a rampant growth, but only if we have 4 fewer lands. Or we can cycle it away by sacrificing a land. And again, there's going to be plenty of times where sacrificing lands is going to be a completely fine thing for us to do. Basically, another trigger for our commander, essentially. Sacrificing that land, getting our graveyard. There are ways to get it back. And yeah, later in the game, maybe we just need more cards. We need lands. Moving on. How about getting a card and a land? Explore. You draw a card, you can play initial land this turn, so add even more to the fun. Next up, ramp and growth. Simple ramp. There you go. Ramp is named after this, basically, right? Go get a base land and play tap for just 2 mana. What's not to love? Moving on, Steve. Yeah, sorry, Steve. You're not going to last very long on the battlefield because we're going to sacrifice you to do that exact same thing. Then we've got Cultivate. Go get 1 basic into our hand, 1 into play tapped. Again, getting that land into our hand can be great to set us up for that additional land play. Moving on, speed of setting ourselves up. Hey, Farhaven Elf. A great way to do so. A 1/1 entering the battlefield, getting a basic into play tapped. And yeah, we can sacrifice this creature to our commander's trigger. It's just a 1/1, so yeah, we could either, chump block with it or, utilize it again with our commander's trigger for that card draw. Next up, we've got Grow from the Ashes. Pay 2 to kick it, get 2 basics into play untapped, or don't kick it, get 1 into play tapped. Untapped. They come to untapped no matter what. Harrow is another great one. Again, there are certain graveyard synergies that we can utilize. Sacrifice 1 land, go get 2 basics into play untapped at instant speed, so you can utilize that mana right away. And then we've got Roiling Regrowth, similar, slightly worse. Those lands are going to come into play tapped instead of untapped. Moving on, Search for Tomorrow, another turn 3 play potentially, or a turn 1 play if we, suspend this for 2. For just a single green mana, go get a basic into play untapped when it is cast. Moving on, we've got yet another creature fodder piece that we can utilize. Springboom Druid enters the battlefield, basically a Roiling Regrowth, sacrifice 1 land, go get 2 basics into play tapped. And again, with our commander's trigger, sacrificing this can be a great thing. Moving on, we've got Circuitous Route, go get 2 lands into play tapped. Nice. And then we've got Migration Path. Exact same thing for 4 mana, or we can cycle it away for 2. And then Vastwood Surge. Again, exact same thing. There's more flexibility there too. Kick it for 4, get 2 counters on every single one of our creatures we control. And of course, there are plenty of ways for us to go very wide with this stack. And also keep in mind, the larger our commander is, the harder it is to deal with. Again, it needs essentially, 5 creatures to block it in combat most time to actually even try to take it out. But with this, it's like, yeah, no, it's 6 power. Good luck blocking with enough creatures to ever take it out. Next up, we've got Nissa's Renewal. At 6 mana, we go get 3 basics into play tapped, and we gain 7 life. So nice little life padding right there. And then finally, in this tactic, we've got Verdant Mastery. Cast it for 6, we go get 4 basics. 2 go into play tapped, 2 go into our hand. Or if we cast it for 4, which we can, we still get this 4 lands. 1's going to go into our hand, 1 goes into play tapped under opponent's control, and we get 2 into play under our control. So if we're okay with, partnering up with an opponent temporarily and saying, hey, I'll benefit you, I want some benefit too, we can do that. But yeah, if we have the mana for it, we can cast it for that 6 as well. Now, you might think we're done with ramping, but we're not quite done just yet. So let's move on to tactic number 2, which I'm calling Land a Hand. Get it? Land a Hand? Very clever, right? So first up, we've got Invasion of Zendikar. A great battle, and yeah, this can work very well with this commander especially. Hey, it's basically an explosive vegetation. ETB, go get 2 basics and a play tapped. Nice. Once you get those defense counters on it, and there are 3 of them, very easy to take out. Again, especially with this commander where your opponents might have a difficulty blocking it. Flips over to Awakened Skyclave. Comes basically a 4/4 Vigilant Hasty creature that is a land that can also tap for mana. So another way to ramp and also, some, sacrifice fodder if we need to with our commander. Sorry, Awakened Skyclave, we might sacrifice you. Moving on, speaking of sacrifice, we're definitely going to be sacrificing Sad Robot. Solemn Simulacrum is a 2/2. ETB, get a basic into play tap. And when it dies, we draw a card. So sacrifice this with our commander's attack trigger, and we're drawing 2 cards instead of just 1. So a great effect for this stack. Next up, like I mentioned a couple of times now, yeah, playing lands from graveyard can be a very, very powerful thing with this commander. Perennial Behemoth is a great one. 2/7 beast that says you may play lands from your graveyard. Very simple, very effective. Can also unearth it if we need to. But yeah. Hey, your commander, again, gives you the ability to play additional lands in a turn. If, say, you sacrifice, maybe like a land with your commander, you can keep playing that back again. Or, yeah, just sacrificing like a Terramorphic Expanse. Evolving Wilds, one of those can be fantastic to just keep getting additional land drops, which, again, can be great for landfall. We'll get to some of those effects here in a little bit, right after we talk about Titania's Command. A great card for a deck like this. Choose 2, exile target player's graveyard, gain 1 life for each card exiled this way. Can be a great way to gain a ton of life and also really hamper a graveyard synergistic strategy, maybe like a reanimation deck or a self-mill deck. Search life for 2, up to 2 land cards, put on battlefield, tap, then shuffle. Does not specify basics, so we can go get those important lands, maybe a bounce land, maybe again a land that might be sacrificed like a Terramorphic Expanse to work well with that graveyard synergy. So yeah, keep that in mind. Moving on, though, we are done with our ramp section. We're going to be talking now about how to really take advantage of all those lands, though, with landfall triggers and a tactic. Number 3, just landed. First up, we've got Retreat to Hagra, a great enchantment for this deck. Whenever landed is battlefield, control, choose 1. Target gets +1/+0 and gains Death Touch on turn. That can be nice. Again, our commander already has Death Touch. Could help out one of our other creatures regardless. The one that we're more likely going to choose is each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. This can drain your opponents in absolutely no time. This can pad our life total, yes, but also, drain our opponents very, very quickly throughout the game. Moving on, we can also make a massive army in no time with the Maria Angel. Whenever you land in his battlefield under control, you get a 1/1 flyer. That is huge. Again, building an Air Force in, like I said, absolutely no time. Going wide very quickly. Great blockers, great attackers. Again, with the amount of lands that we're going to have coming to play with all of our ramp and with our commander, this can be fantastic. Next up, we've got Feldar Retreat. Speaking of that, my goodness, this can help us go wide and tall. Land comes into play under our control. We choose 1, 2/2 White Cat Beast creature token, or you get a counter to each creature control, and they gain vigilance until end of turn. So being able to give our creatures vigilance is huge. Again, our commander is an incredible blocker, and making our army even more impactful, even more effective. Again, we're going wide, we're going tall. We can hit incredibly hard with this. Speaking of which, Retreat to Area is a slightly less good version of this. Landfall, you get a 1/1. That's nice. But also, you can have creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn for the other one. So again, just a slightly less, effective version. Still a very good card, though, in a deck like this. Moving on, we've got Trove Warden, also at 4 mana. 3/4 Vigilance. Landfall. Whenever a land is battlefield to control, exile target permanent card mana value 3 or less from your graveyard. When it dies, you get all those permanents into play under your control, essentially. Hey, what you're going to do is you are going to, maybe exile a bunch of, maybe you can exile small things like a Sakura Tri-Builder and, Farhaven off those kind of things. But also, if you're sacrificing lands, say with your commander, or get like Terror Expanse, those kinds of lands, get them all into play, get a ton of landfall triggers off of this, landfall trigger card. Moving on, we got Maya, Bodyguard Protector. A great anthem for our creatures. Other creature control get +1/+1. Nice. Again, great for our tokens. Speaking of that, whenever a land enters battlefield to control, you get a 1/1 white human warrior creature token. This can make a massive army in absolutely no time. Again, with multiple of these landfall effects in play, things can get really absurd. So we're also going to be running Spore Mound. Make 1/1 saplings whenever lands come into play. What's not to love about that? In an even bigger way, you've got Zendikar's Royal, an enchantment that says, hey, you know what? Let's step things up just a little bit. Let's make some 2/2 elementals. And again, I should have mentioned this earlier. My apologies for doing that. But enchantments are quite hard to deal with compared to a lot of other permanent types. So this can stick around for quite some time. That being said, there is a creature that kind of takes the cake when it comes to our landfall triggers. And that is Rampaging Balos, a 6/6 with trample that can make a massive army in no time. Whenever land enters battlefield to control, you get a 4/4 green beast creature token. That is a ton of power. Again, just say 1 Evolving Wilds, enter the battlefield, crack it, go get another land. Hey, that is going to be 4, or 2 4/4s. That's going to be 8 total power across 2 bodies. And of course, we can play even more lands thanks to our commanders. So, things can get really out of control with all these landfall triggers. Now, as out of control as things can get, there is one card in this deck, in deck number 4, the Golden Pig, that stands above the rest. And the Golden Pig for this deck is Odric Lunarch Marshal. Odric Lunarch Marshal. A 3/3 human soldier for 3 and a white. Beginning of each combat, creature you control gain first strike until end of turn. If a creature you control has first strike, the same is true for flying, death touch, double strike, haste, hexproof, indestructible, lifelink, menace, reach, skulk even, trample, and vigilance. This is an incredible effect because, again, one thing we can count on is that, we have a commander that has 2 very important keywords: first strike and death touch, making that, again, make our army incredibly hard to ever deal with in combat. So again, not just our commander, but now all of our tokens, and even Odric, every single combat, not just our own combat, every single combat, all of our creatures are going to be first striking and death touching. Again, impossible basically to stop in combat unless our opponent's creatures have first strike, or if they have indestructible, they're not going to be able to stop our army. So swing away freely, essentially. Take your opponents out. Also keep creatures back on defense too. And just, they're going to be impossible to swing into as well. So Odric is a fantastic card in this deck, in my opinion. Definitely worthy of the title of Golden Pig. But now let's move on to tactic number 5 to talk about how to, keep this plan rolling, to keep things together, to stick together. So we're going to talk about some cards that can protect ours. First up, we got Blacksmith Skill, a fantastic card. Target permanent gains hexproof, indestructible on a turn. It also has this thing about artifact creature. Don't worry about that. Basically, 1 mana, protect any of our permanents. from pretty much anything. I mean, not everything, but pretty much anything. So yeah, again, 1 mana protect your commander, 1 mana protect, another key piece. A great way to do that. Moving on, Lauren's Escape. Basically the exact same thing for our purposes. Target artifact or creature gains hexproof and indestructible on a turn. Scry 1. So protect a lot of our things. And again, in a lot of situations, it's going to be enough. And also scrying 1, nice. Just additional, card selection for us. Moving on, we've got Swiftfoot Boots. You want to swing with your commander right away? Yep. Do you want to protect your commander? Yep. This does both. Haste and hexproof on an, equipment. Fantastic. Moving on, Rootboard Defenses. We're going to be making a lot of tokens. Perfect. So we can populate getting another token. Yeah, again, if you've got, your Rampaging Bailiff out in play, hey, make an extra 4/4. What's not to love about that? Also, creatures get indestructible until end of turn. Your creatures get protected. Your opponent's creatures might not be so lucky. If there's a Wrath going on, your board is fine, and actually even better with that extra token, and your opponent's boards might not be. So we're also going to be running Unbreakable Formation. Creatures you control get indestructible, and also if you cast this during your main phase, your creatures get a counter on them, and they get Vigilance until end of turn. Nice. Pump your army, have them swing away freely, or yeah, surprise your opponents and cast this out of nowhere to save your team. Speaking of which, we've got your Temple is under attack. This one is flexible. Creatures you control get indestructible until end of turn. So again, a nice 3-mana way to save our team, or you and target opponent each draw 2 cards. So again, if we need some card draw, might make a deal with an opponent to say, yeah, let's do that. Okay, there you go. Speaking of drawing cards, though, let's move on to tactic number 6, which I'm calling Digging Down. And ironically, and I actually didn't really plan for this, but here we go. The first card is Dig Up. There we go. A sorcery for just a green that says, search your life for a basic land card, reveal, put your hand, then shuffle. So we can set ourselves up with a basic land early if we need to, say, hit a land drop, or if we want to get additional land to play with our commander. There you go. Or we can cast it for its cleave cost and go get any card from our deck into our hands. So yeah, a great tutor for us. We can also get cards out of our graveyard, though. Again, those can be lands, for additional land drops. Those can be, well, creatures that we've sacrificed. Those can be things our opponents have dealt with. Again, our important landfall triggers. Let's go get those back with Wildest Dreams. We've got access to a ton of mana with a commander like this. So yeah, go get a lot of things back. Moving on, Night's Whisper, currently budget somehow. 92 cents right now. Draw 2, lose 2 for just 2 mana. Yeah, sign me up for that. Speaking of signing, Sign in Blood. Target player draws 2 cards, loses 2 life. Slightly more restrictive casting cost, but yeah, we can definitely do that. Moving on, we've got Painful Truths. This is not a restrictive casting cost, but we want to cast it for 1 to our colors, because when we do, we draw 3 and lose 3 life. And like I've always said, 1 life for 1 card is well worth it in Commander. Again, you start for 40 life, you've got a final, a finite amount of life, obviously, but is a huge resource for you. So we're also going to be running Read the Bones. Scry 2, draw 2, lose 2. A good amount of card selection, a good amount of card advantage with this. Then we've just got a very simple Harmonize. 4 mana, draw 3 cards. Very simple, very effective, very efficient. And Seer Sundial, this can be great for us throughout the game. Landfall, whenever land is battlefield, 1 enters battlefield under your control, you can pay 2 if you do draw a card. We're going to have a lot of lands sent to the battlefield. We can draw a ton of cards with this. Again, we're going to be ramping a lot, have access to a lot of mana. And also, we can really take advantage of our commander's attack trigger more and more and more throughout the game with Moldavine Reclamation. Whenever a creature control dies, you gain 1 life, draw a card. Note that this is not, say, non-token creature. Again, we have plenty of ways to make a lot of tokens. We've got a lot of creature token fodder. Whenever we're sacrificing those, whenever any of those die, we replace them by gaining a life and drawing a card that is fantastic. And again, with us going wide, well, we can take advantage of that too with Shamanic Revelation, draw a card for each creature control, and also gain 4 life for each of your big creatures too. But yeah, more importantly, hey, go wide with those tokens, draw an absurd amount of cards with this. And we can also get a little more specific with Plea for Guidance. Again, we've got a lot of fantastic enchantments in this deck. Search for life for 2 of them, get them into your hand. Whether those are landfall enchantments or, again, something like that Moldavine Reclamation, set yourself up for success with this. Now, speaking of setting yourself up for success, let's set ourselves up to, well, throw a wrench in our opponent's plans as well. Their next tactic, tactic number 7, there and gone. To start things off, we've got Lure, and Lure is a fantastic card with this commander. We've got some other effects like this, though. It's an enchant creature aura. All creatures able to block enchant creature do so. This is basically like a mini board wipe for our commander against whatever opponent we want. Their creatures are going to have to block our commander, and again, we can usually just take out their entire team of creatures. If they've got 4 or less creatures, we force them to block, and every single one of them is first strike, death touch, gone. Our commander's going to be taking no damage. Our commander's going to be fine. So yeah, a great way to really take advantage of our commander's keywords. Next up, Oblation, a very flexible removal spell. The owner of target non-land permanent shuffles into the library and draws 2 cards. This is basically getting rid of something pretty much permanently because, yeah, shuffling it away is a really good way to do it. Drawing 2 cards for an opponent, that's usually not the best, but again, in a panic situation like, yeah, we need to get rid of that now, this can get rid of pretty much anything, and is a great way to do so. Or, again, it can be a great way for us to actually draw those cards instead. If we're desperate to draw some cards, target one of your own things as well. Moving on, another lure effect that is great, Roar of Challenge. All creatures able to block, our creature must do so. And then also, if we have a creature with power 4 or greater, which our commander already is, it gains indestructible. So protecting our commander even further with that taking out of our opponent's creatures. Moving on, Crush Contraband. Great flexible removal spell. Exile an artifact, exile an enchantment. Or we can just get rid of, well, like a lot of things with Cleansing Nova. Destroy all creatures or destroy all artifacts and enchantments. So depending on the scenario, we can get rid of whatever we need to get rid of. Moving on, yet another lore effect that is fantastic. You look upon it, the Trask. Very frightening. Run and hide, prevent all combat damage to be dealt to you and creatures you control this turn. So that is a really good, combat damage trick if we need to, saying like, oh, we'll just fog essentially this turn. Or gather your courage. Target creature gets +5/+5 gates indestructible on a turn. All creatures your opponents control able to block the creature do so. Our commander gets even larger again. 9/9 essentially without any other bump effects. First strike, death touch, indestructible. Hey, wipe out. Even if a player has 9 creatures, they're all gone as long as they can all block. Moving on, we've got Austere Command, a very flexible board wipe. Choose 2 artifacts, enchantments, small creatures, big creatures, whatever you need to do it and take those creatures out, or artifacts, enchantments. Moving on, we've got Destiny Lead, a flexible card at that as well. Instant for the first part. Target gets +1/+0 indestructible on a turn. A great way to protect our commander or what other key piece we might have. Then we also have Lead, the aftermath side of the card. So cast from your graveyard. All creatures able to block target creature this turn do so. So again, another great lore effect. Moving on, we've got Azuri's Predation, an actual card, that can be a wrath that can actually win us the game as well. For each creature opponents control, you make a 4/4, then those 4/4s fight each of those creatures, essentially. Wipe out all medium to small size creatures, essentially, and yeah, you're probably left over with a decent sized army after that, so have fun. Speaking of fun, in Garruk's Wake, again, we've got plenty of ways to ramp this deck. We've got plenty of ways to make a ton of mana. 9 mana is nothing to us, so let's wipe out our opponent's creatures and planeswalkers one-sided. Swing out with our army, win from there. Now, speaking of winning from there, of course, we can win just by swinging with our giant army. We're moving on to tactic number 9 and talking about, well, another way to win and another way to deal with our opponent's pesky things, because we're just going to deal with them with Death to the Death List. This is a great card for a commander format because, hey, it affects all of our opponents, and again, we can put a ton of mana into this with a deck like this. X, white, white, black, black. Each opponent loses 2 times X life. You gain life, you get life lost this way. Yeah, this can be deadly. This can be game over for our opponents. And even if it's not game over, it's probably going to take out at least 1 or 2 opponents. We're going to gain an absurd amount of life, power life to the point where it's going to be really hard to deal with us. This is a fantastic card as well. Now that we've talked about every single non-lane card in this deck, though, let's move on to a couple of lands. On the tactic number 9, we've got some highlighted lands. The first one is just a very simple bounce land. Yeah, utilizing a bounce land like Golgari Rot Farm can be great for this kind of a deck because, again, if we've got a lot of those landfall triggers in play and we can play additional lands thanks to our commander, being able to display a bounce land can be great to either bounce another land back to our hand or even, yes, bounce lands can bounce themselves back to our hand. So just putting that in play, we're not going up on mana, but we are getting those landfall triggers again and again and again and really taking advantage of that. So make sure you keep these in mind. Also, yeah, I mentioned like Terramorphic Expanse, Evolving Wilds, those times of, fetch lands essentially. Also, the Nuka Pen fetch lands can be great in this deck as well. Entering the battlefield, sacrifice them, go get one of a couple of lands, gain 1 life, great. This is another great way, again, to really take advantage of landfall triggers. Again, basically, your 1 land becomes 2 when it comes to landfall triggers. And then finally, Kazandu Mammoth, and this is an MDFC land. The backside is battlefield tapped. You can tap for a green, or the front side is a 3/3 that can get absolutely massive. Whenever land is battlefield under control, +2/+2 until end turn. So again, this can get absolutely huge on your turn and become a huge threat. And again, especially with those lure type effects to make it so your opponents have to block maybe your commander, this can get through and be very punishing. So yeah, Thalia the Gitrog monster is definitely a very exciting commander, one that can be really powerful, can pack quite the punch, can be built in, a couple of different ways. The way I decided was landfall. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you are interested in this deck, make sure you check out that deck list link in the description below. And yeah, consider picking it up on TCG Player. And again, make sure you're optimizing your cart when you're doing so to make sure you're getting the best price with that. And of course, yeah, comment below your thoughts on this deck. And as always, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.